Denmark shouldn't work the way it does. It's one of the smallest countries in Europe, mostly flat, limited land, no massive natural resources, no huge population to lean on. And yet somehow life here runs smoother than in countries 10 times its size. Cities feel calmer, transportation actually connects. Bureaucracy doesn't feel like a punishment, and problems most nations argue about for decades, Denmark quietly solves. That alone should raise questions, because this didn't happen by luck. Behind the clean streets and cozy image is a system so deliberate, so carefully engineered, that most countries wouldn't even attempt to copy it. Not because they can't see the benefits, but because of the rules, trade-offs, and costs that come with it. So how did a tiny country build one of the most efficient systems on Earth? And more importantly, what did they have to give up to make it work? Because once you understand how Denmark is really designed, it becomes hard not to question whether your own country ever could be. Denmark has a problem that doesn't make sense at first glance. For a country this small, it has an absurd number of roads. Over 12,600 kilometers of roadway per million people, nearly 12 times the European average. That number alone sounds excessive. Bigger countries with more land, more cities, and more traffic don't even come close. On paper, Denmark looks wildly overbuilt, almost irresponsible. And if roads were only about cars, this would be a terrible idea. But Denmark wasn't building roads for speed, they were building them for connection. Highways don't tear through neighborhoods or split cities in half. Instead of forcing traffic through communities, routes bend around them. Roads act less like barriers and more like veins, quietly feeding into something larger, and that's the detail most people miss. Denmark's roads aren't meant to stand alone. They're designed to link seamlessly with trains, buses, bikes, ferries, and border crossings. Every kilometre supports the system instead of dominating it. Once you see that, the density stops looking wasteful and starts looking intentional. But roads alone don't explain why Denmark went this far, because the real pressure on the country wasn't traffic at all. It was geography. Denmark's biggest obstacle isn't mountains, distance, or climate. It's water. A large portion of the country, including Copenhagen, sits on islands. For decades, that made travel slow and indirect. What should have been a straight trip often turned into a 4-hour detour or a long wait for a ferry. For a while, people accepted it. The ferries worked. Nothing was technically broken. But for Denmark, working wasn't enough. Instead of tolerating inefficiency, they decided to remove it entirely. The Great Belt once separated two of Denmark's largest islands. Ferries had crossed it for over a century. Then Denmark built Europe's longest suspension bridge, not because the ferries failed, but because they weren't optimal. Nearly $1 billion spent to save time. Even today, drivers pay steep tolls to cross it. Not as punishment, but as a reminder of how valuable efficiency is here. Then came the Öresund connection to Sweden. Part bridge, part tunnel. Road and rail combined. It stretches across open water, then disappears beneath it. These weren't emergency fixes. They were upgrades. And once Denmark proved it could bend geography to its will, it set its sights even higher. Because the next project wouldn't just connect islands, it would quietly reshape movement across all of Northern Europe. If Denmark's bridges solve domestic problems, this project goes far beyond its borders. Beneath the water between Denmark and Germany, an 18-kilometre underwater tunnel is taking shape, designed to carry both cars and trains at the same time. It's called the Femern Belt Fixed Link. Right now, a train from Hamburg to Copenhagen takes about 4.5 hours. When the tunnel opens, that trip drops to just 2.5. But here's where it gets crazier. That change ripples outward. Freight moves faster. Rail becomes more competitive with air travel. Traffic quietly reroutes itself away from Copenhagen. Swedish travellers heading south bypass Denmark's cities entirely. Without much noise, Denmark turns itself into a strategic gateway between Scandinavia and continental Europe. What's striking isn't just the scale, it's the mindset. No panic, no crisis, no emergency vote. Just a calm decision to remove friction before it becomes a problem. And projects like this only work because Denmark operates under a very specific philosophy, one that shows up everywhere once you know where to look. Denmark doesn't build big because it has endless space. It builds carefully because it doesn't. The country is small, dense, and short on natural resources. That leaves no margin for waste. Every road, building, and policy has to earn its place. And this pressure changed how the entire country thinks. Over time, that pressure created something uniquely Danish: systemization. Nothing exists on its own. Everything must fit into a larger structure. Design isn't about being flashy, it's about being inevitable. You see it in furniture, clean lines, no excess. You see it in architecture, function first, ego last, and you see it most clearly in city planning. Denmark doesn't wait for problems to appear. It designs systems meant to prevent them entirely. Congestion, sprawl, inefficiency. They're engineered out before they become political battles. That mindset explains why Denmark consistently chooses long-term optimization over short-term convenience, and it led to one of the most quietly influential urban plans in modern history. After World War II, Copenhagen faced a familiar threat: unchecked growth. More cars, longer commutes, green space slowly disappearing. Instead of reacting later, planners acted early. In 1947, they introduced the Five-Finger Plan. Copenhagen would only grow along 5 corridors, each following an existing railway line. Everything between them would stay green. No highways slicing through farmland, no endless suburban sprawl. If people moved outward, they'd live near trains, naturally, without being forced. Over time, cars didn't vanish, they just stopped being necessary. Daily life reorganized itself around rail and bikes because that's where homes, jobs, and services were placed. The city expanded, but stayed compact, dense, but breathable. Without strict bans or loud campaigns, Copenhagen quietly reshaped how people move. And that unlocked something even more unusual: a transportation system where everything actually works together. Once Copenhagen locked in how it would grow, the rest followed. Bikes weren't an afterthought, they became core infrastructure. Today, the city has over 350 kilometers of bike lanes, many fully separated from traffic. Some cut through parks and quiet corridors cars could never reach. But listen to this. The real difference is integration. Bike parking sits inside metro stations. Trains dedicate entire sections to bikes. Buses, metros, and rail lines are designed to cooperate, not compete. For just 600,000 residents, Copenhagen offers 123 transit stations. London, with nearly 10 million people, offers only about twice that. It feels almost unreal, but it wasn't always this smooth. In the early 2000s, Denmark's rail system outside cities was failing. Tracks aged past safety limits, signals broke down, delays became routine. That embarrassment forced a hard reset. Denmark committed to replacing its entire rail signalling system with a fully digital European standard. Expensive, slow, politically risky. Completion isn't expected until 2030. Once again, Denmark chose long-term stability over short-term comfort, because when everything is connected, one weak link threatens the whole system. Efficiency in Denmark doesn't stop at infrastructure. It extends into daily life. Starting a business takes minutes. Medical records are online, changing your address, booking a doctor, applying for benefits, all handled digitally. Even your driver's license lives on your phone. Students receive monthly government support. Healthcare feels almost invisible. Public services fade into the background. For most people, it's incredible. But that's exactly where the risk begins. When everything is digital, everything is connected. And when everything is connected, it depends on trust. Trust in data security, institutions, and long-term intentions. Denmark runs on that trust. The system works because people believe it will, but that reliance on compliance and transparency is fragile. Efficiency this deep isn't just technical, it's social. And that brings us to the question Denmark never fully answers. Denmark didn't become efficient by accident. It made deliberate choices again and again to design systems instead of reacting to problems, and to prioritize long-term function over short-term comfort. But nothing here is free. The average Danish worker pays over 35% in income tax. That money funds infrastructure that works, healthcare without debt, education without chaos, and cities that feel calm instead of overwhelming. The question is whether that trade-off is worth it. Denmark works because people agree to play by the same rules. They accept higher costs in exchange for stability and predictability. As long as that trust holds, the system delivers. But that also makes it hard to copy. This model depends on cooperation, transparency, and a culture willing to give something back. In many places, that agreement might never exist. So the real lesson from Denmark isn't about bikes, bridges, or trains. It's about design as a mindset. and the uncomfortable truth that the most efficient systems always demand something in return. Whether that price is too high depends on what you value. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you've made it this far.